Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. Thank you all so much for your continued support. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'd like to give out a quick announcement really fast. The channel is growing and I could not be happier. Thank you all so much for enjoying the content that I am bringing to this sleep therapy channel in the form of vocal melatonin. With that being said, I just recently did a giveaway. Once this channel hits 10,000 subs, I will be doing another giveaway with even bigger prizes. And this time I will be choosing 5 lucky winners. And that is just me showing my appreciation to all of you. Please don't forget, if you are enjoying what you're hearing, down in the description box, you can buy me a coffee. Each coffee you buy me helps me out and the channel, and it would be truly appreciated. Thank you so much. With that being said, let's get you that dose of vocal melatonin that you crave so much. It is time to go back to ashes, for when we arise from the ashes, we are a stronger, better, bigger, and happier person in the morning. Sit back and get comfortable, or tuck in and get warm, and enjoy these true, scary stories. Disclaimer: some of these stories may have material that is not suitable for all listeners. Listening discretion is advised. Lost in the woods. So, this isn't my personal story. It's from my lifelong friend Jackson that I've been friends with for 17 years. And in all that time, there is only one incident that has scarred his mind. Years ago, we were on a camping trip with his family. It was the summer of 2008, and we were relaxing on the way to the campsite. We got to this small town on the way and decided to camp in their woods. So, we set up camp. Jackson's mom made dinner, and after we watched other camping videos that their family had recorded, we made marshmallows and had a fun time. Then, at around 8:30, we went to bed. And now we're going to shift to Jackson's perspective. At around 1 o'clock a.m., he woke up. He says he didn't know why, and since he did wake up, he took a walk. It was around 5 minutes later when he heard something. He hadn't noticed it before, but there was a faint noise. Thump, drag, thump. Jackson, being the cocky person he is, muttered, "A-holes don't know how to keep it down for a while." He'd assumed it was a drunk, taking long, exaggerated steps. But it stayed the same volume every time. Then he got curious, and he walked toward the noise. He hid behind a bush when he got close enough. What he saw scared him so bad he forgot to scream, which saved him. A man had dismembered body parts with him and was trying to stick them to a tree. He had multiple dismemberments with him. Then he saw a bag full of axes. That's what he was hearing. The thump was him using an axe to stick a body to a tree, dragged another to a different tree, then stuck that one up. Thump, drag. Now Jackson was confused. Then the man looked directly at him. Jackson ran the second he noticed and got lost. He somehow lost the man, but he realized he was lost as well. Switching back to my perspective, I woke up hours later and saw he was gone. So I woke his parents up and we called out for him. We eventually found him, but his clothes were torn, his eyes were baggy, and he was in shock. We took him to the hospital, and he was having nightmares. Every time he'd wake up, he would scream, "Don't kill me, please." When he finally calmed out of his mental state, he told me the story, and I believed him because he'd never lied to me. It's 14 years later, and we're still good friends. This incident was never forgotten, only ignored. But I wanted to tell you this to get it off my chest, as I will never forget that horrible experience. Voicemail. This happened back in my 20s. It was kind of a dark time for me, and I was feeling a lot of uncertainty and kind of just living for the day, but like in the least responsible ways. Also, this is a string of events, and I think it was kind of a battle for me, like me as the object. It gets pretty terrifying. First thing, my flip phone goes off and it's a voicemail from a 5-digit number. I think it was 44444. The voicemail sounds like a young girl humming a tune for like a minute. It freaked me out at first, but I started to feel comforted by it. I saved it and listened to it often for a few weeks, sometimes sharing it with others who'd always freak out about it. Due to the calming tone of it, I wanted to believe it to be an angel, and I was hoping for the guiding kind. Though I was not a practicing Catholic and I didn't read the Bible. I believed in God and prayed often, except maybe around this time in my life. I even remember hanging out with a friend who thought he attracted ghosts and had a stupid app on his phone that supposedly ghosts can interact with to show you words. He usually just got weird stuff, if anything, but he hands me the phone and the energy changes. I get 44, bike, angel. I get heavy chills. I think I actually might have cried. I was still healing from breaking my leg and being unable to pursue my escape of DH mountain biking. That had truly taken a toll on me, and I might have been depressed. Not just that, but I needed that in my life. All the words that stupid app gave kind of had a meaning to me. A few days later, I'm at a party and I play the voicemail for someone and they get creeped out. They asked me to replay it, then one more time for someone else, but I accidentally hit 4 instead of 7 and deleted it. I was actually pretty bummed out and felt like I lost something precious. I got to my grandmother's. She's very religious, a Filipino Catholic. Her reaction was different. I forgot if she said it may be an angel or an evil spirit, but she was certain there was an evil spirit in pursuit of me. She tells me she'll give me a little Jesus statuette for protection. But when we open the door to the room where her figures are, she gets freaked out. Her religious figures were all originally at the corner facing the door, but they were all rotated and facing the wall. We go in, and the figure she had in mind for me had the head broken clean off. At this time, I'm praying and noticing the sensation of something being around. Some nights later, I'm coming home from a party at about 3 to 4 a.m. I make a right turn at pretty good speed, but I have a green light, and I notice headlights coming at me from my 7 o'clock at extra high speed. I react, thinking it's a drunk driver running a red light at 90 miles per hour, and drive up the center island divider. I get out of the car, which is totaled, and there's a tweaker nearby who saw the whole thing. I talked to him, and he said there was no other car. I don't know what the road incident was about, or if it's related. If it were, I don't know what purpose there may have been in me wrecking that car, which I really liked. But yeah, spooky stuff ceases for a while from that last incident. I still think to this day there is something attached to me and following me around. Disclaimer: this next story contains disturbing content. I highly advise you do not take this as a joke or fabrication. Listening discretion is advised. We all know true stories that are very popular because of what they are, and what they hear is mostly conceived. But what I am telling you has to be the most ruthless, heartbreaking, and truest of tales. Samantha Josephson, age 19, was an ordinary young girl with potential. She had gone to a university and had a very happy life. Then, one night, her friends invited her to the Bird Dog Bar in Carolina, which is important to remember. After about an hour or two, she was completely drunk, and when she walked out to go home, she casually ordered an Uber. Footage from the Bird Dog confirms her entering a dark vehicle, and in this situation, she got into the car and said a drunk hi to its driver. The driver was named Nathaniel Rowland, but this man was not her Uber. It was just a similar looking car that Samantha had mistaken for her ride. And usually in a normal situation, the driver of the random person will laugh it off with you. Maybe get pissed if they're in a bad mood. But Nathaniel didn't say anything. He engaged the locks, trapping Samantha where hell would happen. After a bit of a while, Nathaniel parked his car and Samantha got confused. And then Nathaniel unleashed the savage attack he inflicted by proceeding to stab Samantha 120 times. This was done with an unusual two-bladed knife. Samantha banged on the windows but was trapped, and it was a lot of stabbing before she was stabbed in the carotid, putting her out of her misery. Rowland then dropped her body in a nearby forest. The police had eventually caught wind she was missing, and her body was later found by a group of local turkey hunters. The police eventually traced down Rowland as the murderer. Rowland was caught while out driving, and once he was seen, a traffic stop was engaged. Rowland attempted to escape but was caught. He was taken in and questioned for his actions. And in the back seat, they found bleach and a bottle of window cleaner. But this was not the first time Rowland had attacked someone. He had kidnapped another woman not too long ago and kept her in the car, beating her and threatening her. In July of 2021, Roland was found guilty of murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to years in prison by the judge, who was a seasoned veteran and said it was the most vicious murder he'd ever seen. Roland is locked up now, serving 2 life sentences, and it's a wonder how one mistake can change your life forever. A word of advice: always check who you are getting in a car with. Who's on the back porch? I've always been a big believer in the paranormal. I lost my dad in 2016, and I've heard him talk to me. I've seen things, felt things, all just unexplainable. I'll start with some background. Me and my friend, we'll call her Aubrey, met in September of 2017, 10 days after her daughter was born. She didn't like me at first, but before I knew it, she adopted me like her own, and we were attached at the hip, practically inseparable. I actually ended up living with her on and off for about a year or 2, and helped her raise her daughter when me and my grandpa weren't on great terms. I call her Mom. She calls me daughter. Her daughter calls me Sissy. We're family, blood or not. So, you can take a guess how often I was at her house. Her grandma wasn't home for months at a time, so we were the safe house, the party house, the chain-smoked cigarettes on the back porch when you're going through a breakup house. We had friends over all the time. We were all super close. And that house was like a breeding ground for paranormal activity. There was knocking on the walls, footsteps down the hallway, things moving around, voices, the feeling of being watched, the random cold chills, even the piano playing by itself. Me and Aubrey's at the time boyfriend heard it from 2 separate rooms one night. It was only us 3 in the house. All of it. If you can think it, it probably happened. I could tell you guys 100 stories of things that happened in that house. Not just to me, but to all of our friends. My fiance was waiting by himself for me and Aubrey to get home from the store and heard voices, like a full-fledged conversation, in the hallway. He grabbed a bat to start swinging, but no one was there. Anyway, this particular story happened in 2018. I had just recently graduated high school, so I was always at her house. We enjoyed a nice smoke session on her back porch every once in a while, but she still had to Mom and I still had to Sister, so we never got blasted out of our minds. Just a few hits and we'd smoke some cigarettes and go to bed for the night, when it was just us. Sometimes we'd stay up later just talking and laughing, but at that time, her daughter wasn't sleeping well, so we were usually exhausted and just wanted to sleep. This night, we had a friend of ours, we'll call him James, come over and hang out for a bit, and we all smoked a little bit, smoked a few cigarettes, talked and laughed, and then James left, and we decided to call it a night because Aubrey was exhausted, and I didn't want to be out there alone, so I came inside too. Aubrey goes back to bed, and she always turned her phone on Do Not Disturb because she didn't want to wake her daughter, since it was always a fight to get her to sleep. We did everything we could to not wake her. A brief layout. You walk into the front sitting room from the front door, and there's the hallway to the left that leads to the bedrooms. Aubrey's was the last on the left. And bathroom. And to the right, there's the doorway to the kitchen, all the way to the right on the north wall, and the doorway to the living room right next to it on the east wall. There's a pull-out couch in the sitting room that you can see into the kitchen from. So, I have a clear look to the porch as well as the TV from where I'm laying on the pull-out couch. I've been inside for probably about an hour or two. I'm not super tired this night, so I'm facing away from the doorways, scrolling through Instagram, when I suddenly hear a high-pitched frequency sound. So, I sit up on the pull-out, trying to see which direction it's coming from. When I realize the TV got left on, but it's just a black screen. Like, if your gaming console goes into rest mode or your cable box turns off. Still on, but nothing on the screen. So, I shrugged it off, just the TV. And as I'm going to roll over to lay back down, I see someone sitting in Aubrey's chair on the back porch, smoking a cigarette. We all had our own assigned chairs outside. So when you first walked out the sliding door, mine was on the left and hers was on the right. Just your typical swivel patio chairs, with the other chairs just around, making a circle around the little table out back that has the ashtray on it, where we set our drinks and etc. The back porch light is on so I can clearly see someone there. But when the kitchen light is on too, it created a glare on the glass door of anything that was sitting on the kitchen table. At first, I'm kind of moving my head around to get different views from where I'm sitting. Maybe somehow the glare is making it look like someone is sitting there, and my eyes are just playing tricks on me. But no, it really was a person. I start to think maybe James forgot his cigarettes or something, but he would have called or texted to let me know he was coming back to grab them, and especially would have said something if he was gonna hang around to smoke a cigarette, alone or otherwise. So I'm looking, trying to figure out who the hell is smoking a cigarette on our back porch when we're not out there with them, without even telling us they'd be there. All of a sudden, it looks at me. It looks at me, dead in the eyes. I froze. I felt like I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, and my body was covered in chills. It starts to stand up, but I don't stick around long enough to find out whether it's gonna walk right through the door like Casper the ghost, or knock on the door like a person. I grab my phone and run to the bathroom. I'm texting Aubrey over and over, telling her someone is outside, and I don't know who it is. But of course, she's not answering because her phone is on Do Not Disturb. And everyone knows once Aubrey is in her room for the night, don't open that door for fear of waking the little crotch demon that Aubrey had to have cut out of her. So, when I open the door, she's giving me a look like, "What the hell do you want?" And I'm trying to say as quiet as possible while I'm panicking, trying to tell her someone is outside. She tells me to stay with her daughter while she grabs some type of weapon. I can't remember what, and she goes out back to look. She comes back and tells me she didn't see anything. No sign of anyone. Nothing. She grabs the baby monitor and comes out to the living room with me while I tell her what just happened. And she offered to let me sleep in her room that night, in which I did. We never knew whether it was human or something else. Needless to say, we went out and bought baseball bats, machetes, and large hunting knives to leave in different parts of the house, in case anyone ever tried to break in. Me and Aubrey are both 5'3" and 100 pounds soaking wet, with a tiny human to defend. The hell are we gonna do, you know? Human or not, it was enough to make us come up with a plan if anything like that ever happened again. No one ever said they came over that night and just forgot to call. No one ever said, "Oh, that may have been me," when I told everyone the story. Me and Aubrey never found out who or what it was. Human, stranger, friend, apparition, paranormal. Who knows? I'll never forget it though, and it has forever traumatized me. There's someone in my house. I've said this a lot before, but this time I actually mean it. I was relaxing in my bed for a bit before deciding to get up to use the bathroom. All of my family is asleep at this point, as they are early to bed, early to rise type of people. All the lights are off when I got up, so I bring my phone as a flashlight. I've had bad jump scares in the dark before. I cross the hall to the bathroom, no problem. As I'm washing my hands, I pause. I hear random clicking. 2 quick clicks right after each other. Then a short pause. Click, click, click. They get faster while still being spread out. It's definitely human or something close to it. It's the clicking sound one might make flicking on and off a light switch if they're bored. Or, in this instance, the sound of the lamp in the living room being turned on and off. Or, so I think. I can't tell where the sound is coming from. So I finish washing my hands, turn on my light, march out of the hall bathroom and search the house. Nothing. Odd, I think, and a bit unsettled and disturbed, I go back to my room. I finally got comfortable after doing a quick sweep of my room and moved to lay down, as I have to get up early tomorrow. I scrolled around social media for a while when I heard the very unmistakable noise. Absolutely nothing else can make this sound. Of the shower curtains getting swept back. I stop, now fully alert, and listen. I haven't heard the footsteps of anyone, or hear something hit the bottom of the shower. So something couldn't have fallen and hit the curtain, and a family member couldn't have done it. I hear it again. Someone moving the shower curtain. The realization hits me slowly. The tapping and clicking wasn't coming from the living room or another bedroom. It was coming from inside the bathroom. That's why there was no footsteps when I heard the curtains move. That's why I couldn't tell exactly what direction the clicking came from. The whole time, whoever or whatever it was in the same room as me. Which gets us to the present. It's been half an hour. There's been no more odd noises. I'm still paralyzed in bed, and I haven't gone to check. I walk into the bathroom and pull the shower curtain back. There's nothing there but a pair of muddy footprints with no one in sight. To this day, I have no idea who was in my house. Demons are real. I never really believed in the paranormal or supernatural. I always thought the stories about people being haunted or possessed were just stories made up for entertainment, or cases of severely mental ill patients being misunderstood by fanatical priests claiming demonic possession. I never suspected that they were actually real. But when I was younger, my naive brain would be put in its place. It was the summer of 2007. Life was good. I had a pretty normal teenage life. I had a few friends my age who lived in the same neighborhood as me, and we would do a lot of outdoor activities like hiking, mountain biking, and fishing. We lived just north of the Ozark Mountains in a nice little town in Arkansas. My father had worked very hard to give us a good life. He came from a poor family and joined the military at 18 to better his future, and it paid off. He got a good job working on airplanes, and we moved to the country. My parents got a steal on a really nice old house in the village. It was a nice little community built into the woods, which had golf courses, private lakes and trails, and its own shopping center with a harps and a couple of restaurants. We were a happy, normal, middle-class family. That is, until that thing showed up and ruined our lives. There were a lot of local legends about the natives that used to inhabit the area. Supposedly, our entire community was built on top of sacred land. I used to walk the trails near my house a lot, and you could find cliffs and overhangs with Indian paintings on the walls and remnants of their civilization. I always felt bad about how they were driven from their homes by my ancestors, but I was still grateful for my home and wonderful life. The kids at school would often scare each other by telling tales of shamans summoning skinwalkers and rakes, and that, to this day, they still haunt the woods at night, looking for a midnight snack. I always laughed it off. Ghosts and monsters aren't real. They're just made-up stories to scare kids. I honestly thought the ghost hunter shows were ridiculous. You wouldn't hear or see anything on camera, but the people in the show would jump at a creek in the night, and suspenseful music would play while the camera focused on empty darkness. Those shows can be fun for the imagination, but the reality of paranormal entities is much more terrifying. They can tear apart families and bring your whole world crashing down. I would learn this dark reality one summer night. The air was cool. I had my window open and could hear the wind flowing through the leaves. The cicadas reverberating through the midnight woods put me in a sleepy trance. I relaxed and drifted off to sleep. In such a peaceful place, I was completely safe. I always felt one with the woods. It really is beautiful here. Cradled in the sounds of nature, I drifted deep into sleep. Then, a wave of panic. I feel every hair stand up. Chills down my spine. I feel the eyes of someone on me. I can feel their sinister intent. Every fiber in me is telling me to run. There is something here that wants to kill me. No worse. It wants to own me, to see me suffer. It has been watching me for a long time. I have been chosen. I can't breathe. Help me. Help me. I scream. "Mom!" I hear laughter. Not human. Not a physical voice. Multiple voices of all octaves laughing at once. I can't open my eyes. I can't breathe or talk, but I see its eyes. Blue, bloodshot, bulging eyes. Huge pupils. Red is filling my mind. I feel pressure. My entire body is vibrating, and I feel like I'm going to explode. I gasp as I fully awaken, but as I open my eyes, I freeze. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Through my open door, I can see something laying on our living room couch. It's clearly visible, but clearly not a person. It's like a shadow, but flowing. The moonlight illuminates its face, a skull with a sinister smile. It has those same eyes from my dream. Huge, bulging, wide-open eyes. Crystal blue pupils. It's staring at me, smiling. It's awkwardly sprawled out on the couch, and its shadowy body, like a translucent but pitch-black cloak, flows as if underwater. I'm getting chills just typing this, and I want to be clear that this is not a fictional story. This really did happen. I was so scared I was frozen. I felt electricity going up and down my spine and through my brain. My eyes were wide and watering. My mouth hung open. It stared into my eyes, into my mind for what felt like hours. It then quickly shifted out of sight. It darted down the couch and into the shadows. Adrenaline hit me and I ran into my parents' room. I burst open the door panting and covered in sweat. My parents at first annoyed, but it was the typical thing parents do when something like this happened. But as I described every detail about my encounter, and when they saw how terrified I was, I started to see a look of unease and fear in my father's eyes. He was also scared. He believed me. My father, being a devout Christian, believed in demons, and he was convinced I had just been tormented and that I was in danger. He was very serious, and I could see that he was disturbed by what had just happened. He woke up my little sister, and the whole family gathered in the living room. I wish my dad had never done what he did next. He got out his Bible and turned the pages to a verse. I can't quite remember the actual verse, but it was something about casting out demons. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave my family alone," he yelled angrily, cursing the demon. "If you want one of us, take me. Leave my family alone." We sat in the living room, talking well into the night, and after a while, we were all tired and went back to bed. I couldn't sleep, though. I couldn't forget those eyes, its evil smile, the way it moved. It was disturbing. Fast forward a few months and things were normal. Me and my sister went back to school, and for the most part, I had forgotten all about the demon. I even convinced myself it was a bad dream or even sleep paralysis, even though that was the only time sleep paralysis had ever happened to me. I went on with my life until we got the worst news I had ever heard to this day. My dad was diagnosed with a rare form of bone cancer, and it had spread. He was dying. We were devastated. I hugged my father and cried all that day. I couldn't believe I was going to lose my dad. He was always so strong and seemed very healthy. The weird thing is, and the doctors were also puzzled, his cancer was usually only found in teenagers. It was a cancer that almost 100% of the time was only found in boys in their early teens. This shocked me. It made me feel guilty. The whole experience of the demon became prominent in my mind, and I remembered my father's words to the demon. I think it had its eye on me, but went after my dad instead. I wish it had taken me, though. My family would be much better off if it had. My father remained positive through his sickness. He went to chemotherapy sessions, started eating healthier, and worked out as much as he could. With his bald head and amputated leg, people would often come up to him and thank him for his service. He always laughed and said thank you because he was a veteran. However, contrary to what people thought, his condition was much worse than if he had stepped on an IED. He lived for 3 more years, even though the doctor said he had less than a year to live. He always stayed happy and positive, more for our sake than his own. But toward the end, he started to slowly deteriorate. It was awful. I couldn't do anything to help him. The man I looked up to, who protected us, who I always saw as invincible, was crumbling right before me. He lost all of his weight and started sleeping on the couch to not disturb my mom. He was so sick. He was suffering so much. I would hear his death rattles and moans and want nothing more than to help him in any way that I could. Something that disturbs me so much to this day is that I started to realize something. He more and more resembled the demon. He was getting so thin he looked like a skeleton, and he had very blue eyes. Sometimes he would just look at me from the couch, and I would get chills. The demon had been mocking me, imitating what he would do to my father while viciously smiling, as if it was funny. This enrages me. How can something be so vile, so purely evil? My poor father soon died and left us a broken family. My mother fell into a deep depression. I looked after my little sister, tried to be the best father figure I could be, even though I was a poor substitute. We fell behind on the bills and the bank foreclosed our house. We lost everything. The next handful of years were a struggle, but now I'm an adult and have gotten some sort of a stable life. I recently figured out why my father was so shaken that night and didn't just blow it off as a bad dream. I visited my sister recently, and we started talking about ghosts and the paranormal. I asked if she had ever seen anything like that, and she hesitated for a second, but then told me. And what she said gave me chills. She was very young the night I saw the demon, and had largely forgotten that night. But she told me she used to see a shadowy man standing at the end of her bed. He had a skull for a face. Demons are surely real. My Ouija board tried to warn me. Several years ago, maybe a year or so after I finished high school, I was with a group of friends. I'll change everyone's name, including my own for privacy reasons. Anyway, this group of friends and I were quite bored on a summer night in a small town. So, naturally, we broke out a Ouija board. Like most places, we had our local ghost stories, tales told to kids to keep them out of the woods. Well, we took our $12.99 glow-in-the-dark Ouija board to one of our town's most infamous spaces at midnight. So, me, Phoebe, along with friends Monica, Rachel, Joey, Chandler, Janice, and Ross, all went to our local junior high school courtyard, where legend has it you'll hear a baby cry at midnight, to play the Ouija. We started by asking all the usual questions, and wouldn't you know it, not a damn thing happened. So, defeated and still bored, we trudged back to Rachel's place. She lived real close. Her mom was really chill. Looking back on it, probably a little too chill, and told us we should have lit candles and sat in a circle, really do the damn thing. So, being incredibly stupid and immature teenagers, we did it again. But this time, it was a little different. We asked all the usual. Is someone here? Yes. Do you want to harm us? No. Monica started acting strange. She was breathing kind of heavy and tearing up. No one else really noticed, but I did. I wish I had said something. Rachel asked, "Do you want to tell us something?" Yes. What? Joey and Chandler had noticed by now that Monica was visibly and audibly upset. We met eyes, not wanting to break the link we had created. Without words, we agreed to let it ride. What? Janice asked the Ouija board again, more forcefully this time, as she was becoming scared and impatient. Hurt. That's when Monica let go. She began rocking back and forth, crying and sweating profusely. Ross started to go to her, but along with the other, I screamed for him to stop. Don't break the link. Rachel, eyes now brim with tears, asked, "You want to hurt one of us?" No. So, someone we know will get hurt, maybe? Yes. Okay. We all sat back, Monica still noticeably hyperventilating, while Ross's face was still plastered with worry. Chandler gave me the "she's totally being dramatic" look, and honestly, I agreed. I wanted to get this moving along already, so I said, "Fine, who is going to get hurt?" Jay. And circle Jay. Rinse and repeat. We briefly discussed it as a group. None of us knew someone whose name began with a J. Me again. So, someone with a J name is going to get hurt? Yes. How? Wreck. Monica had visible tears rolling down her cheeks. I was beginning to get annoyed. Is anyone else going to be hurt? Yes. Well, who? I demanded, impatiently. Brian. At this point, it was like 2 a.m. We were all irritated and bored and just blew out the candles and quit playing. We never said goodbye to the board. I was actually spending the night with Rachel that night. and once everyone had left and we had settled into bed, it was about 3 a.m. Just as I closed my pretty little eyes, my mother called me. My cousin, Jay, was in a really bad motorcycle wreck. He wasn't dead, but he was hurt. Really bad. And ended up in a coma. But here's what really had me messed up. He and his wife had just had their son a couple weeks before. They named him Brian. I know it sounds absolutely bonkers, but it's been almost 20 years, and my cousin Jay, he's still alive. When he came out of his coma, he was different. Sometimes I will catch him looking at me, but I don't recognize his eyes. If I'm ever alone in a room with him, I'm just overwhelmed with this lightheaded feeling. I don't know. I think that board possessed my cousin. I used to work night shifts until this. It's spooky season, which always gets me talking with buddies about the creepy things we've been through. I almost never touch on this story though, because it's not one of those classic scary stories everyone likes to share around a few beers. I used to work night shifts at this large manufacturing facility. Night shift was a very small crew. 5 security, 5 of us running admin and parking. As admin staff, I sat with security as they'd switch between patrolling and monitoring the cameras. It was usually pretty silent and boring. Now, I'm not sure how the building got its haunted story. No one besides us ever wanted to work nights because of the rumors. None of us ever had any experiences. No one died there. No crazy accidents happened. It wasn't destroyed and rebuilt. It was peaceful and uneventful. But stories always spread, as they tend to do with big, dark, creepy spaces. And it was creepy. It's surrounded with woods, circled with fencing, mostly empty at night, which made it feel incredibly imposing and empty. Creepy motion-activated lights inside and out. Sounds carried and echoed. But still, none of us ever had any experiences there. Until this. It was around Halloween, maybe a week or 2 before it. I was halfway into my shift, making it my lunch hour. It was chilly, and I went to my car to grab my bigger jacket and have a smoke break. I was right outside the back door, which the fencing runs closest to. It's maybe 10 yards off the back door. The only light is motion activated, and I had to keep making grand arm movements to keep it on. It's all grass and shadows up to the fence, and the light doesn't really hit that far. I was watching videos on my phone, and the light cut out. I sat in the dark a bit, sipping my coffee and finishing my cigarette. As I was finishing, I reached up, waved about to activate the light to find the ashtray. But as the light flickered on, I heard a noise at the fence across from me. We do get some animals out there, and they could get startled. It was all explained in my head instantly. But as I stood up, I heard the fence keep silently jiggling. When I looked up, I didn't see much. The light didn't really illuminate much outside its circle on the ground. I don't know why, but my first thought was to say, "Hello?" When I did, the sound stopped for a moment. I squinted into the darkness, trying to adjust. The light then went out. There in the darkness, the moon had a little more effect lighting up the area. The fence started lightly jiggling again, really lightly. As my eyes adjusted better, I saw movement. It looked like a person opposite me at the fence, fidgeting with the links. I thought, this must be a kid trying to spook us. Maybe they were going to break in and ghost hunt. Some high school kids have before without knowing the building never closed, and we were usually pretty cool with them, poking around as long as they didn't touch anything and made it fast, so they could run and tell their friends they lived through it. But that wasn't really common, and this was one person, alone. It felt off. I radioed in with my walkie to desk security. Hey, we have a visitor out by north door, behind the fence. I've seen the monitors of camera feed, and I know this area is totally covered. They'd be able to see the fence clearly. My walkie beeped back, and the voice said, "We aren't reading any movement at the fence. Is it in the tree line?" "Negative. They're fiddling with the fence, right in front of me." This all happened in the span of seconds. My cigarette butt was still in my hands, and I just barely swallowed my last sip of coffee. They didn't even have the chance to reply to me when, from the fence, I heard this massively louder thrash of the lynx, and all I saw was the figure full-on sprinting at me. I made a terribly embarrassing choking noise and crushed my coffee cup up against the knob, trying to rush myself in. The fence is so close, it's not going to take more than a few bounds to reach me. I pushed myself in so hard and held the knob in place, trying to figure the deadbolt into place. The knob was flicking down hard against my hold. I could hear and feel something moving against the opposite side of the door. I radioed back, "Get down here now." But I already heard steps coming my way. The knob stopped moving by the time they got there. It was all over with. Back at the office, the security staff tried to play off like I was having a laugh about it, like this was a great Halloween joke I played. I didn't understand why they weren't taking it seriously until I saw the playback. It was just me outside. There was nothing there. My brain couldn't explain what I experienced outside while confronting the video. I immediately thought this was a big goof on my behalf. Maybe they fiddled with the footage and had someone trying to scare me, but they genuinely thought I was the one goofing with them. We were doing that whole back and forth, okay, whose idea was this, who is messing with who, until the second time watching the playthrough. We noticed the way the door handle kept moving, even when I removed my hand from it. Both the inside camera and the outside caught it. I noticed right before I panicked and turned to run inside, the fence made a slight jolt as if it was pushed. There were no holes in the fence or any kind of cuts made where somebody could squeeze through. There was no creepy shadows or unexplained wisps of smoke or lights or movement besides those. Just me in the night jumping out of my skin and running inside. I kept trying to think back to when I jumped, when that figure burst at me full speed, if the light activated for their movement or mine. I couldn't decide. I couldn't remember exactly. It all happened so fast. But nobody there wanted to admit anything happened to me. It was tricks of the moonlight, overactive imagination, and too much coffee. Branches against the chain links. No one's ever experienced anything weird here, and it wouldn't just start up here now for no reason. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't want to argue about it. They already thought I was being weird about it. I don't know. Maybe I was. I went about finishing my shift, but no one used the back door again that night, and it remained locked. The longest employed security was finishing up the shift at the desk with me in the office. It was before dawn. The morning shift was trickling in the parking lot. He watched the cameras in silence while I typed away. A few minutes before clocking out, he cleared his throat and told me, "I never really liked the North End. It feels like someone's eyes are always on me." It's honestly the most he's ever said to me in the year plus I've worked here. The most I've heard him say. I felt like that statement held even more weight for that alone. I didn't quit though. I stayed on another 7 months until the company was bought out and they stopped overnight shifts to pile more work on day shifts for less money with less employees. There was never another incident. I never actually went out there again, though. I stopped smoking, took my breaks out in the lobby, or wasted time chatting with coworkers, but I made excuses not to sit outside, to be honest. I feel like a few of us did. I have never before or since had any moments where I felt like my imagination got the better of me. And I truly believe that wasn't the case here. I kept thinking back at the door handle jerking down when I was steps back on the walkie. That had to be proof I wasn't imagining the whole thing. No one ever brought it up again. And wherever anyone asked about working in the old creepy factory, everyone would say, "Oh, we never saw anything up there. It's just a boring building at night." I would just smile and keep my side of the story to myself. But I wondered if anyone else was holding stories to themselves. Maybe they'd slip out after a few beers and field a few more questions about the haunted factory. My dad met a demon. Keep in mind, this was years before my friend's story or ones I have researched. I want you to do this for context. My dad was a truck driver when he left the military in the late 2000s. By the time me and my siblings were born, he only drove in our home state of Texas, and summers were extremely busy for him. This incident happened in 2006. On one of his extended trips across Texas. I believe he was driving south on 281. He was getting pretty tired when he pulled into a truck stop. He was making his way to the on-site convenience store when he noticed a young woman pacing back and forth at the front of the shop. She looked to be in her early 20s, slim, very pretty, and wearing a tank top with cut-off shorts, according to my dad. Normal attire for Texas summers. She was carrying a plate covered with aluminum foil, as if she was making her way home from a family barbecue. He finished his business in the store and headed back to his truck. As he got in, he was stunned to see the blonde woman was now sitting in his passenger seat. He was utterly shocked. He had no clue who this woman was or how she got past his locked door. My dad was always very vigilant on the road and never left his truck unlocked. He demanded that she get out of his truck. He wasn't afraid at this point, but something felt off about this mysterious woman. She sat there and looked at him, with a covered plate on her lap, not saying a word. For a moment, he wondered if he should just get out, walk over to the passenger side door, and just yank her out of the cab. But he decided against it. I'm still not sure why. The whole thing was beyond strange. So, my dad, against his better judgment, turns his rig on and drives off, the blonde woman still in his passenger seat. A few miles up the road, he attempts to make conversation. I guess he was trying to quell the extreme discomfort he felt. He asked her name, but the woman remained silent. As he continued down the highway, lustful thoughts began to creep into my dad's mind. I'm sure it had been a while since he'd last seen my mother, out there in the rural Texas roads. I mean, who would find out? Just this one time. What could happen, right? My dad puts his hands on her thigh, right above her knee. As soon as he touched her, the woman turned from a gorgeous young woman to some kind of hellish monster. Her face turned rugged, and her eyes were now black pits. Her teeth had turned into sharp fangs with a long, unnatural tongue. The demonic figure let out a guttural hiss, and from the plate she was holding came a bunch of slimy movements, as if there was a pile of writhing worms beneath the foil. A putrid smell permeated the truck's cab, and my dad quickly turned his face from her and managed to bring the truck to a stop on the side of the road. As the truck came to a halt, my dad opened his door and jumped out of the truck. After taking a few moments to compose himself and allowed his breathing to return to normal, he looked back at his truck. The demonic woman had vanished. He was now alone on the road. He started to pray, asking God to rebuke the evil spirit. He eventually got back into his truck and drove off. The woman did not return. However, it was a while before the lingering stench dissipated. When my dad got home from that trip, he recounted everything to my mother. He had been so scared that my mother wouldn't forgive him for his unfaithful indiscretion. He had seen a lot in his life, but nothing had ever frightened him like that before. He blamed himself for impure thoughts, and perhaps that's why he attracted the evil spirit. I know that many might say everyone cheats on their partners all the time, and nothing like this happens to them. I can't explain why. I only know what happened to my dad on the dark, lonely roads of Texas. When I was older, I brought up this experience and asked, "Dad, did that really happen to you?" He would never respond with words and just nodded. "100-year-old haunted house." So, for a bit of context, I'm a 19-year-old female, and during my senior year of high school, I was living with my aunt to finish out my last 3 weeks of high school, as I was graduating early. Living in the house was me, my aunt, her husband, my cousin, who we will call H, who was only an 11-year-old female. For some background, we lived in a very rural area, and the house was from the era when slavery was still in place, with 2 stories. There was the main staircase up to my aunt's and uncle's room, and the one me and my cousin shared, as well as a balcony that was situated in between. Then there was a secondary staircase up to the original servants' quarters, an area that was under construction, as it was completely separated from the rest of the house, having only that staircase as an entrance and exit. No way to access the rest of the second floor from that area, as well as the attic, which is only accessible from the servants' quarters. I was home alone as I was under quarantine, since it was in the midst of COVID, and my father had contracted it, while my cousin, aunt, and uncle were 2 hours away, picking up my other cousin from the airport with her husband. My cousin had pestered me multiple times with stories about the 2 sisters who owned the home back when it was a plantation, and swore up and down the house was haunted. Me, being several years older than her, always brushed it off as her imagination, and there being no truth behind the bizarre stories. But that day, I started to question whether or not they were true. It was the early afternoon around 3 p.m., and it was still light out, and I had my laptop in my lap, drawing and listening to music as I did homework. Seeing as I was home alone, I decided to take advantage of having my music all the way up in my headphones, causing the music to sound like it was coming from a speaker if I took the headphones off, since I'd be bothering my cousin if she had been home. This was normal for me to do when no one was around, and this wasn't the first time I had been alone at the house. This day was different, however, because out of nowhere I heard a loud thud coming from above me, and it had to have been really loud if I could hear it over the music blaring through my headphones. I took off said headphones and looked up at the ceiling, thinking maybe there was a squirrel or something up there, which wasn't uncommon. When I heard nothing after a while, I put my headphones back on, only to hear the same loud thud a few minutes later. I again took off my headphones and got up waiting as still as possible to hear if the thud happened again. Sure enough, it did. Only this time, it came from outside the room, as if it was on the balcony. Of course, I knew that couldn't be true, since the entrance to the balcony was sealed and hadn't been used in years, because the balcony itself was unstable and needed to be redone. So, this couldn't be a person. I decided to leave the room and look out the window of the door to the balcony, only to see nothing. No squirrel, no person, nothing. About now, I was getting annoyed. Whatever was making the noises was disrupting my concentration, and I needed to finish my homework. I went back to the bedroom and sat down, trying once again to concentrate and finish my work. Only, as soon as I sat down, the thud came from the other side of my cousin's closet, where the original servants' quarters were, which is sealed, a solid wall. No way to access it unless I went all the way downstairs and through the stairs in the kitchen. Thinking this meant my family was home and my aunt was showing my other cousin the area that would be her and her family's room, I decided, fine, I'll take a break and go say hi. Only when I got downstairs, looked outside, there was no car. I was still the only one home. So, against all the instincts I had to just bolt outside, I opened the door to the stairway leading to the sealed area of the house. I went upstairs, and when I finally entered the completely cleared out open empty space, I saw absolutely nothing at first. There aren't any windows on this side of the house, and so I tried to flip on the lights to no avail. So I turned on my phone's flashlight, only to have the daylight scared out of me. Walking around in a completely perfect circle in the center of the room was a woman. Thin and tall with dark, stringy hair and a tattered dress. As soon as the light hit her, she stopped, and I could hear her neck crack as she turned her head suddenly to look at me. I bolted down the stairs, my feet touching maybe 3 or 4 of the entire flight, slamming the door to the staircase and locking it from the outside, which is the only way to do so. I heard slamming against the door and bolted to the bathroom through the kitchen, slamming the door behind me, locking it and curling up in the tub, keeping the curtain closed as I tried to call my aunt, terrified. She never picked up. I stayed in the bathtub until my family got home and waited until I heard them calling for me before I even peeked out the curtain and got out to greet them. I explained what happened, and my aunt's response was, "Oh, you met Maggie. Don't mind her. It's best to ignore her. She won't hurt you. She just likes to try and scare people." To this day, I've never seen Maggie again, and I won't stay the night in their house anymore. They have since set up the servants' quarters for my other cousin and her family and removed the wall between H's closet and the servants' quarters so that the top floor is connected. One of the strangest and most terrifying UFO experiences of my life. I just want to share one of the craziest experiences of my life. Sadly, I didn't record it because I was petrified. I couldn't move. If it wasn't for my friend, actually, I don't know what would have happened to us. This takes place in Shepherd, Michigan. I was visiting a friend, and this is the country, like middle of nowhere. Small town, dirt roads, and cornfields. We were bored, obviously, and it was late. The sun was setting. So we decided to take a walk to downtown, a small strip of restaurants with the only paved road. It took us about an hour to actually get there. I want to point out I didn't see anything in the sky. Yet. We're at a park on the edge of this downtown. There's 1 or 2 sheriff vehicles. Can't remember clearly, this happened about 5 or 6 years ago. We've only been here about 20 minutes or so. She explains to me there's been car hoppers and police have been searching for them. I think at this point I heard a helicopter. I honestly thought it was funny that police would be going all out with a helicopter looking for some car hoppers. I'm more from the city. Okay, to get to the point. We get up and head back home. We're turning the corner back onto the dirt road, passing this police car. I can't tell if anyone is even inside. There is fields on both sides of this road and a forest in the distance on my right side. Immediately, we notice the UFO. It took me a second for my brain to register what I was seeing. But there, low in the air, just above the trees, was this rod-like thing hovering in the air. Best I can describe it is, it was the size of a bus or 2, and almost like a rod laying at a slant in the air. There were 2 green lights on each side. These lights were very bright and saturated in color against the darkness of the country. No light pollution. So I have my flashlight out so we can see in the dark, right? As soon as I realize I'm looking at a UFO, I go to take a picture. And before I can do that, this thing starts spiraling towards us like a fan. This giant rod-like thing is spiraling right at us. You can hear the wind whipping against it, and a helicopter somewhere out of sight. And I just freeze, unable to react or understand what's happening. Just pure terror. Wondering if this is going to crash into us. It doesn't make sense. My friend pushed my hands down, still holding my phone and the flashlight away from the sight. Immediately, this thing stopped, repositioned itself, and began slowly moving away, not very far above our heads. I could see lines on this thing. The helicopter was here now, right in front of this thing, guiding it away. Right over downtown, too. The only place where anyone would witness this. Totally inconspicuous. We stood there for maybe a minute or two watching this, in awe and in terror. And I regret so much not recording. Just to be able to watch this event again and maybe catch something new I didn't catch before. Or share with others this truly terrifying experience of mine so they can understand exactly what I saw. But all I have is my memories. I don't know if anyone else has made calls of this, and maybe that's what the police were there for. There was a police car just at the corner, parked at an old car repair shop, facing the wrong way. And I don't know if anyone in downtown, just around the corner, was outside to witness this. But it was clear as day. So if anyone else was outside here, there was no one missing this. It's crazy because I didn't see anything at all in the hour walk. This thing just arrived in the field in the 20 minutes or so we were at this park. And I think the only reason my friend could think rationally in that situation is because she didn't believe in UFOs and tried saying that it was some kind of police aircraft afterwards. But when I explained to her exactly what she witnessed, that we don't have or aren't supposed to have zero gravity technology, she got quiet. She definitely became a UFO believer after that day. Someone was following us in the woods. This happened when my sister and I were younger, and we went hiking in the woods in our backyard in North Carolina. We only had a few neighbors around us, and our house was surrounded by woods. It was a Saturday afternoon during the summer, and my sister and I decided to go hiking alone together, like we did quite frequently. We were both under the age of 8, but our parents let us go hiking alone. We loved exploring the forest and discovering new places. As we made our way through the woods, everything was fine at first. When we went to our favorite place where we usually hung out, something didn't feel quite right. I felt an uncomfortable feeling like something was going to happen. I looked around at my surroundings, but I didn't see anything or anyone. My sister and I continued walking through the woods until suddenly we heard leaves crunching behind us, so we turned around to see what it was. There was nothing there, so we thought it was just an animal. As we started hiking again, we heard the leaves crunching, and as we turned around, we saw someone run and hide behind a tree. We could see their shadow coming from behind the tree, and it looked like a person. It was definitely not an animal. We both looked at each other and felt paralyzed by fear. We started freaking out and thought this person was going to kidnap us. I grabbed my sister's hand and told her to run. We ran as fast as we could back home. Once we made it home, we ran inside and told our parents. Our parents became worried and told us next time we go hiking, don't go too far from the house anymore. I don't know who was following us, but it still freaks me out to this day. I don't know what they would have done to us if we hadn't have run away. Something would watch me at my boyfriend's house. I always believed in the paranormal. I've had experiences my whole life. I feel it's a common thread in my family. Both my mother and grandmother are exactly the same. I was dating a guy in my early 20s. He was a little bit older and owned a beautiful old home. I remember seeing the exterior for the first time and just fell in love with it. That's until I stepped inside. It was instant, that punch in the stomach feeling. I knew something was really off about this house. I didn't say anything as it wasn't my place. I just hoped the feeling would pass. I went over a few times, but I wouldn't stay the night. The first time I stayed over, my boyfriend went for a morning jog. This was the first time I was alone in that house. I decided to use the time to shower and get ready for the day. It was strange as soon as I got up to walk to the bathroom. The feeling of being watched was extreme. I wasn't wearing clothes, and the feeling of needing to cover up was so strange. I brushed it off and jumped in the shower. I felt the same feeling the entire time I was in the shower. Imagine showering in front of a creepy stranger. That's how it felt. I went to reach for the towel on the towel rack and couldn't find it. Strange, because that's where it was before I began the shower. I made sure of it. I stepped out, and it's on the counter by the sink. I don't know how it got there, and that's when I see it. A massive handprint on the steamed up mirror. It was clear as day and looked fresh. I absolutely freaked the hell out. The hand was elongated and almost claw-like. I grabbed my towel and locked myself in the bedroom until my boyfriend returned. To this day, ever since that incident, I will never step back foot into my boyfriend's home. A true story entitled Mr. R's Visit to Kilbarrack Cemetery. Mr. R was a well-known figure in Dublin, Ireland, and was said to be a gentleman of integrity. The following is his account of a peculiar visit to Kilbarrack Cemetery on the outskirts of Dublin City. I was on my way from Raheny to Howth. I had traveled from Malahide intending to catch the train to the Raheny station, but our train was some minutes late, and the consequence was I missed the Howth train. Not relishing the idea of hanging about the railway station for 2 hours, I set off on my march to Howth. hoping I might catch the train at Sutton. And what a march it proved to be. I was but imperfectly acquainted with the road, but I was confident that I would be able to strike the correct route, having got directions from the railway porter. I turned to the left and passed the little crescent of cottages, soon leaving the cheery lights of the whitewashed public house in the rear, and having reached the main road, set off at a brisk walk, now plunging through lakelets of mud kindly left for the unwary traveler. The road I had traveled was steeped in Cimmerian darkness, which the bright stars failed to relieve. Now I had the music of the waves, the twinkling and flashing beacons that guide mariners up the river, and the lights that marked the townships on the south side of the bay. Up to this point, I had not met a single person, and the inhabitants seemed to have retired, although the hour was but a little past 9 o'clock. I mistook my bearings, turning up a lane that had 6 inches of mud over its surface, and did not learn of my mistake until I knocked smartly with my cane on the door of a comfortable-looking house, half a mile up the road. After much hesitation, one of the inhabitants, no doubt much wondering at the presence of a stranger in the vicinity, opened the door about 6 inches and directed me to retrace my steps down the merry lane and reach the main road. In half an hour, I was again on the road and soon reached the creepy vicinity of Kilbarrack Cemetery, with its numerous mounds and rude mementos of death, and its pointed ivy-clad ruins of a chapel, which looked doubly eerie under the stars, shadowed by the darkly looming hill of Howth, steeped in an oppressive stillness relieved only by the sea that has been so many a dead man's grave, and the occasional cry of the sea birds that seem never to sleep. I was suddenly confronted by an old man dressed in quaint garb, and who had a rich luxuriance of lovely flaxen hair that matched a beard that reached below his breast. Taking him for the oldest inhabitant, I politely inquired my way and offered him something for the information. "Keep your money, wayfarer," the old man said. "Follow me." He led me towards the graveyard, telling me on the way that he had watched me for some time and guessed that I had lost my road. I soon noticed that his gait was not that of an ordinary mortal, that his dress was that of a long bygone age, that his headgear was rather soldier-like, and then there was a sort of transparency and glow about his flesh, which I had never seen before on a human being. Yet, strange to say, I never suspected that he was other than an ordinary man. He led me over the fence and across the graveyard. I, stumbling and plunging among the grassy mounds that covered the dust of past generations, he, proceeding with an apparent ease and steadiness, a fact which I attributed to his better knowledge of the ground. He led me towards the ruined walls of the chapel, and I followed free from suspicion. Arrived here, he by some subtle influence caused me to enter, and I saw a sight that filled me with a strange feeling that was a mixture of awe and dread. Seated amongst the rank growth of nettles and weeds that covered the ground, perched in the embrasures that served as windows, and one even on the apex of the gable, were a company of men who in every respect resembled my ancient guide. On observing them closely, as they sat in the dim starlight, I noticed that they all wore what seemed to be coats of chain armor and had the bearing of military veterans. I was greeted by them with cordiality and bidden to sit down on a boulder, which I did. No sooner had I sat down than the earth seemed to open. The walls of the ruins vanished. I was forced into a vault-like opening and was carried down, it seemed for miles, surrounded by the band of shady warriors, until I was suddenly dazed by a strange radiance when I fell into an immense grotto illuminated with many links that hung on the walls. Seated on an upturned cask was one who wore a brazen crown, whose locks were wider and longer than those of the numerous company that surrounded him, and who was evidently a person of high degree. This personage in a loud voice gave me greeting, saying, "Welcome, stranger. By Thor, thou shalt partake of our cheer and drink defiance to the foes of the Sea Kings." I felt I was to be transformed into a new being. I drank of the stuff they offered me, and found that it rather burned my mucous membrane, yet had no further effect. The being on the cask raised a scepter, and those who reclined on the floor of the grotto or sat on the boulders of stone rose. "On with the dance," ordered the commander, and then began a wild war dance in which I was forced to join, becoming mysteriously armed with a battle axe and sword, which I swung in imitation of others in the strange company. The dance over, the chief addressed the followers, telling them that an adventurer, Sir Armory Tristram, was on his way to attack the peninsula of Ben Adar to drive out the dunes, and exhorting them to be strong in the fight. He then asked me to address the warriors. I mounted a rock to do so and began. "Danes and warriors, you have always been brave in battle and fearless in the face of death, when opposed to the greatest of chieftains, Brian Brohim." "Brian Brohim," yelled the company, "greatest of chieftains, thou art enemy to our cause." I was rash enough to make an uncomplimentary remark to the chief of the soldiers, whereupon I was forced up the shaft through which I had descended, hurried by the Danish specters, for such I am convinced they were, and on reaching the ruins of the chapel, I was subjected to rough handling, and footing too, and was sinking into unconsciousness when the chief of soldiers blew a long, weird blast on a whistle, and the company disappeared. I awoke to find a Coast Guardsman bending over me, and on telling him of my wish to reach the railway, he helped me to my feet, and stiffened and sore, led by his direction, I reached the station in time for the train. I trembled in every fiber when the engine emitted a demoniacal whistle that vividly reminded me of the closing episode of my weird adventure. Some of my friends suggest that I slept. Others insinuate that I was the victim of material spirits, but I hold that I was thoroughly composed mentos and intend to consult the psychological savants. Whatever the real reason for Mr. R's mysterious tale, I suggest that should you find yourself lost on a dim and misty night, walking past Kilbarrack Cemetery, you avoid any strange, bearded apparitions who try to lure you into the ruins. Haunting an old farmhouse. In 2006, I stayed overnight with a buddy at a second property his family had purchased. It was an old farm just on the outskirts of Florin Road, Watt Avenue in Sacramento, California. My buddy's family had not moved in, and he wanted to spend the night on the property to get a feel for it. The previous property owner's husband passed away, and she sold the home for cheap. What struck me as odd was that she left all the furniture and tons of miscellaneous personal property behind, which we discovered later had belonged to her late husband. I told my friend to get rid of all that junk because in my culture, Laotian/Thai, we believed it was bad luck to hang on to a deceased person's property. The superstition was that the dead might come back and look for their property. On that particular night, I spent the night on the couch in the living room. My buddy was sleeping on the floor next to me. I could not fall asleep, but heard my buddy snoring loudly. Therefore, I knew he was in a deep sleep and did not witness the events soon to follow. As I am slowly drifting off to sleep, I heard the closet door located about a car length from my feet slowly open. I knew it opened because it made the creaking noise from when a door swings on a hinge. At that point, I became fully alert but kept my eyes closed. I could hear my heart beating out of my chest. I was laying on my back and I faced the ceiling. I slightly opened my eyes and glanced towards the closet. It was a full moon, so the living room was well lit. That's when I saw it. A black shadow coming towards me from inside the open closet. It had the silhouette of a man and stood approximately 7 feet tall by 2 feet wide. It crept toward me, and I was so scared, I just closed my eyes and froze in place. I felt paralyzed, and I was on the verge of crapping and pissing myself. I kept my eyes closed and remained still for what felt like 5 minutes. Then, the second half, and the most scariest, of this paranormal bullshit began. The blanket I had draped over me slowly began pulling off of my body. I could feel parts of my upper torso getting cold as the blanket pulled away from my skin towards my feet. I felt each individual hair on my skin stand because it was so cold. As the blanket continued pulling away and got closer to my feet, I whispered my buddy's name multiple times, repeating, "Dennis, Dennis, wake the F up. Something is going on here, fool." Dennis eventually stopped snoring and said, "What the F, man? I'm trying to sleep, damn it." After that, all the paranormal stuff stopped. I wrapped multiple blankets around me and slept in the prone position for the remainder of the night. I never had a more scary paranormal experience. I also have not been back to my buddy's farm since that incident. Sometimes weird things happen, and they just cannot be explained. That night still bothers me until this day. I think the event took place sometime shortly after midnight. I thought the couch I was sleeping on was my buddy's, but later discovered it was part of the property that was left behind from the previous homeowner. I honestly think her late husband came back from the dead to reclaim his couch. And that, dear listeners, is the end of these true scary stories. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you are awake and listening, I hope you have enjoyed this collection of stories. In the meantime, I'll read to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good